Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and today we'll be doing a debrief for Anisha's story. We'll be doing the key takeaways, the reasons she stayed, and the things that we want for her and you going forward. And for those of you who have not listened to Anisha's story yet, here is a brief summary. So Anisha entered her marriage believing that she had found someone who made sense for her life, the life that she wanted. And it was an introduced marriage. He came through a trusted family connection. So they spoke the same language. They worked in medicine. He understood acupuncture, which was the field that she was working in. And he presented himself as being spiritual, which was really attractive to her. So on paper, this person, this abuser that is coming in, looked like the perfect person for her. And he was vouched for through the system. And this relationship moved quickly. And because they lived in different cities, Anisha had very little ordinary day-to-day experiences with this person before they got married. And they didn't really have a lot of meetings before they got married, but they did meet a few times, and then they got married. And on their honeymoon, the abuser began criticizing Anisha under the guise of helping her improve herself. Eventually, there were insults, unpredictable anger going on, then physical intimidation, and eventually scary intimate partner violence. However, the abuse did not happen every day. Months could pass between incidents, and she works hard to really try to understand the abuser more. She is really trying to explain things logically to herself. She tried to be more patient, more forgiving, and just a better wife. And little by little, she started to live on eggshells, started walking on eggshells, and really hiding the reality of her marriage from the people who loved her. And even when Anisha eventually understood that what was happening was abuse, leaving was not easy. She was a healer and a problem solver. That was her identity. And even though she knew what was happening was abuse, at one point, part of her believed that there was a way to fix what was going on. And she reached out to his family, tried marriage counseling, searched for professional help, and just continued to protect the abuser from the consequences of what he was doing because she was worried about his career, immigration status, and their future as a whole. So the police were never called after certain abusive instances. No reports were ever made. And eventually, Anisha saw that he was never going to support her in the way that she deserved. And she got clarity here. And then they were separating after she got this clarity. She told her family the truth, and she began looking back at the years that she survived by going through her journals. And she was eventually able to see the pattern instead of a collection of isolated incidents. And over time, she rebuilt her career, regained confidence herself, wrote about what happened to her, created a nonprofit, and now she is helping other people get their voice back too. So that is a summary of Anisha's story. And now we're going to go into our key takeaways. So the first key takeaway is moving fast can keep you from seeing a pattern. And Anisha's relationship moved incredibly quickly. They talked for a couple of weeks, met in person, became engaged around the 3-week mark, and were married 6 months later. And because they lived in 2 different cities, she really had only spent a handful of weekends with him before making a huge, huge life-altering decision. And right here, I just want to be a little bit clear. Moving quickly does not automatically mean that someone is abusive. I'm just saying that moving quickly can have things blur. You can't stop to think. You can't see all the issues going on. And if there are issues, you might forgive them quickly. They might feel like one-off instances and not a pattern at all. And then when it comes to patterns, when it comes to the speed of these things, nothing can unfold for you to see patterns. There's not enough time for many disagreements, or when someone is disappointed, or when someone says no, to see how these people are responding when these disagreements or disappointments or saying no happens. You need to see what happens when they don't get their way. You need to see whether a person is going to apologize without turning it around on you. You need to see whether their words continue to match their actions once all of this early stage whirlwind excitement wears off. And for Anisha, she did see flashes of temper, entitlement, victim playing, but she didn't have enough repetitions of these things yet to know that those were not random moments, that they were going to be pieces of a pattern. And that is one danger of the whirlwind. You can become committed in every way before you really have enough information to understand who you have committed yourself to. So moving fast, doesn't necessarily mean that you're with an abuser, but it does mean that a lot of things are going to be blurred. You can't make proper decisions when things are going at a very fast speed. The speed of everything is blinding everything. And the next thing on our list is criticism can be disguised as helping you become better. And one of the earliest things we see is criticism being presented as self-improvement for Anisha. And Anisha is cold on the honeymoon and wants to wear a sweater, but somehow that becomes something wrong with her. She's told she is weak for wanting to wear a sweater and that she needs to improve herself. She needs to become better at handling the cold. So the abuser here is not necessarily saying, I want to control what you wear. The abuser here is presenting himself as the person who knows what is best for her. Becoming the truth teller in her world is what is going on. And once, this abuser becomes this truth teller, you stop listening to others' opinions as much, and you stop listening to your own voice as well. This is creating a power dynamic shift where they are the authority. And once that gets established, it is easier to abuse someone. So the abuser then can start identifying more problems in you, and you become the person who is supposed to work on themselves. Now, this control here can start to really take over everything once this happens. And you may not want to hear this criticism anymore, and you may start doing the work for them as a way for you to keep safe. And for Anisha here, she is someone who values growth and self-improvement, and this is part of her identity. So for her, this was a really good way of attacking her identity. And once your identity is attacked, it can really create more doubt in you, and the abuse here can get an even stronger hold over your whole entire world. And the next thing on our list is intermittent reinforcement and gaslighting. The abuse that occurs can make the abuse harder to recognize. So for Anisha here, this is a twofold situation. One, some instances, not all the time, but there are periods where the abuse is happening months apart. Plus, there could be gaslighting going on. So an abuse is happening months apart. This is kind of an intermittent reinforcement where there's going to be good times in between, and then there's going to be bad times. It's hard to recognize just on its own here what is the reality and what is the exception. Are they abusive or are they not abusive? Because you're having good times with these people. But with Anisha, on top of this situation, is when she would try to discuss the new situation, the new incident, and connect it to an older incident, the abuser would then gaslight her and accuse her of living in the past and not being able to let go of things. So because the abuser here was doing a great job of making her see things only as these one-off incidences, with the help of sometimes there being good times and then sometimes there being bad times, this intermittent reinforcement that is going on, it became really hard for Anisha to recognize that everything that was going on was abuse because this person was disrupting the pattern. So because the abuser was doing a really good job of making her see things only as one-off incidences, with the help of this intermittent reinforcement at the same time, it really became hard to recognize a pattern. And just with the intermittent reinforcement stuff going on, those incidences, good times, bad times, it's hard enough to recognize a pattern there. But now you're getting this thing on top of it where someone is gaslighting you, saying, stop living in the past. So it'll be even harder for you to see a pattern where you're now having to look at things as individual incidences. And when she left the relationship and looked at her journal, she saw 42 abusive incidences that she wrote down. So when Anisha was reading back her journals in the aftermath, it really gave her a lot of information to see that she was living from incident to incident and not being able to see this as a pattern. And I think her journaling is a great tool. It's a great tool while you're in the relationship to start seeing these things as patterns, to start reading them while you're in the relationship so you can see that these aren't one-offs and that these things are real. And in the aftermath, if you aren't reading it, and still, if you are reading it during, you can still read it in the aftermath of everything. This can really help bring clarity and help you get out of situations possibly a little bit faster because you can see these things on paper, because you can start seeing the patterns and stop seeing things as one-off incidences when you're really reading it all at the same time and putting piece by piece together. And the next key takeaway we have is protecting the abuser in the relationship can eventually leave the victim vulnerable later. And Anisha protected her abuser and never called the police because he was an immigrant. She was worried about his visa. She worried that he could be deported. She was worried about his medical career. She was worried about his license and his reputation. So even after the physical violence, she didn't seek any kind of medical care or call the police that would have documented what happened. And many abuse victims do this. There is guilt. There is financial repercussions. You don't want your kids to have a parent in jail. Or there could be fears of what will happen if the authorities do nothing. Like, what am I in for after he comes back? So safety does need to be thought of right here in a huge way. This isn't for everyone. But for Anisha later, when she sought a restraining order, because nothing had officially been reported anywhere, the judge did not grant that order, even though the judge believed that she had been abused. And it's terrible that she was in this position to begin with. And for many, it is a huge safety issue as well if you are going to report these things. And that is an important thing to note, that if you do not think that it is safe for you to report these things, then do not report these things. That is the first thing I'm going to say. But if you do feel that these things are safe to report, it can help in the long run when it comes to what a court wants to see regarding proof of abuse. But just a reminder, everyone with this one, stay as safe as possible and use your judgment and ask others as well if you can. So those are our big key takeaways. And now we're going to go into the reasons Anisha stayed. And some of these things may overlap with what was already said, but I really want to hammer these things home. So one of the reasons Anisha stayed, she believed the abuse was a problem that she could solve. And this could be the biggest one. Anisha was already a healer. She was a problem solver. She wanted to help people. She believed in growth. So when the relationship became confusing, she approached it in the way that she approached all her problems, in her life. She tried to understand it, thinking that if she could understand it more, that there would be an answer on how to fix it. But with an abuser like this, there will never be enough understanding, as her abuser was making her to be the problem. He would never look at himself. So once that refusal happens to look at themselves, you'll just be in a constant loop with no off-ramp. And because of this, Anisha was in this relationship longer. And the next one on our list was the abuse was intermittent enough to keep resetting her hope. So sometimes there were months in between incidents, and that gave Anisha hope. Sometimes he'd be loving, warm, funny. That gave her hope. Peaceful stretches, that gave her hope. But then the cycle would happen again. Those moments of hope are keeping her in this relationship because she knows that he can be a good person sometimes. And it's done so erratically that you don't know when that reward will come. But you're hoping for a reward. And when that reward does come, it will give you the greatest relief, thus continuing the relationship only to repeat this addictive cycle over and over and over again. And then the next thing on our list and the last thing on our list is something that we've already mentioned, the patterns, gaslighting, and clarity. So if you are seeing these things as one-off incidences, it's hard to see the pattern as a whole. And the abuser did a great job of gaslighting her reality in her story, so she couldn't see those patterns. And, this kept these things as one-off incidences. And when that happens, it was impossible for Anisha to get any sort of clarity, even when there was extreme physical abuse. And this whole system kept her and many of you in relationships longer. So for Anisha going forward, and for all of you, is I want your identity to always belong to you. And for Anisha, in many ways, she's already reclaimed her identity. In this relationship, the biggest parts of Anisha were attacked. It was something that the abuser wanted to diminish within her. And just like Anisha, I hear identity attacked in so many survivor stories constantly. Maybe your identity was being an achiever, and then someone spent years telling you that you accomplished nothing and you weren't good enough. Or maybe your identity was being a good mother, and then someone criticized every parenting decision you made or undermined you with the children. Maybe you were a generous person and that was your identity, and they called you selfish every time you considered your own needs. Or maybe you were calm, and after years of being pushed and provoked and criticized, you finally scream back, and then they use that reaction as proof that you were the unstable one. So abuse can really interfere with the story you tell yourself about who you are, what your identity is. And once someone gets you to start defending your identity, they gain an incredible amount of power, because now you are no longer only arguing about what happened, you're arguing about who you are as a person. And I don't want you spending the rest of your life proving that you are maybe a healer or a good person or smart or someone worthy of having their own dreams. Those things belong to her. Those things belong to you. And for everyone listening, I want you to begin separating who you actually are from the identity that someone else is giving to you while they are trying to control you. So what I want for Anisha is exactly what I want for everyone coming out of these relationships. I want your identity back in your hands. And I think Anisha's story gives us a great example of what that can eventually look like. The healer in her did not disappear. She took it back. And I want that for all of you too. And I hope that you found this episode, this debrief episode here, helpful, enlightening, educational. And if you want to be a guest on our survivor stories like Anisha was, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com. Click on the guest form button, fill out the form, and we'll go from there. We also have a support group at our website, and we also have a newsletter on our website where you get a free workbook for every new survivor story that comes out. And that can all be found at narcissistapocalypse.com. And that is it for today's debrief episode. So for myself and Anisha, we hope you have a good night.